Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Dental Assistant Nerds podcast. I'm your co-host, John.
Hi everyone, welcome. It's Amanda.
All right, Amanda with us as always. And today we're going to talk about a topic that we've seen repeatedly in the private groups, and it is what if your office, your private practice, is absorbed or bought out by a corporation? Like, what can you expect? Is it good? Is it bad? That's what we're going to get into today.
Yeah, this is something that can obviously blindside all of us. I personally have never been a product of this situation, but of course we all, are few degrees of separation in our dental small community. That this is happening naturally as we see more and more that outside HR corporate companies are buying up our smaller hometown practices that are, growing. Of course, we see Heartland Dental. We see Elite. Is that correct?
Elite
Or
is another one,
yeah,
yeah.
I wanted to say Excel. So there's so many different variations that uh, the name on the building is staying the same, and the owner is still having a partial ownership potentially in that practice, but now it has a larger ownership of an outside, smaller, maybe corporate style ownership. So definitely can expect some changes. Some change is hard, let's be honest.
It
As
is.
much as we know that life changes and we all grow and we all have different needs and we all have different uh, needs at different stages of life, that we become very monotonous. Let's even think about maybe some of us that have stayed in a position that we're not happy with or we're not thrilled with just because it's comfortable. So this corporation change or this ownership change typically isn't an easy transition, and typically we get blindsided.
Yes. Yes.
So that's one of the things that I had touched base with John shortly before the call here, that it's hard to make this change, but it's really hard when you come in Monday morning and, oh, by the way, thank you for working me as a company, as a dental assistant for 6, 10, 15 years. And, but as of tomorrow or as of today, the new owner is whoever. So why don't they give staff a heads up that maybe an outside company is purchasing the practice? John, what's your knowledge on this?
So, 2000, really going to date myself here. I believe it was 2007. I was in a practice and private practice, and summertime. We worked Saturdays. I remember it was Saturday in August, and the doctor was kind of like, "Hey," it was just myself and one person at the front, and he said, "Hey, I want to talk to you guys at the end of the day." And I think we worked like 8 to 1, so we got done. And I remember we were in the lab of all places. He just happened to, that's where he kind of happened to catch us at the end of the day. And he was like, "Hey, I sold the practice. We're done at the end of the month, you know? So, and it was the middle of the month. So we're 2 weeks out. I was, obviously shocked. My jaw hit the floor. This is someone that I had been with for 12 years. Someone that, came to my wedding, someone that I thought I was close with and helped build the practice. So um, he was like, unfortunately, the group that has bought the practice, they have no interest in the staff. They already have staff. They were basically just buying everything but the staff. They bought the charts, they bought the equipment, and then he had even, agreed to sign on and work with them for, one day a week for however many years, while the transition was happening. So obviously you're hurt when it happens. You're kind of like, wow, this is, especially being there that long. So eventually this kind of comes up in some groups, and I'm telling the story. And from a dentist perspective, now they're finally chiming in, and now it finally makes a little bit of sense. Basically, when when a doctor decides they're going to sell a practice, they have to put together a lot of different numbers. And that obviously starts with how many active patients do you have? What kind of revenue are you bringing in? What is your equipment worth? They factor all these things in. That's how they can even come up with a negotiating price. Well, the staff is part of that price. So if you give the staff too much of a notice and alert the staff, obviously when each staff member leaves, if they plan on keeping them, now the practice is worth less. So this is typically why the doctor keeps it quiet until the day of all the paperwork's been signed. Because at this point, hey, I had 10 staff members. This is the agreed upon price. I signed the paperwork. There was 10 staff members still intact. So, is this is definitely one of those defining moments where you realize it is a business, it's not a family, because it can take the wind out of you. So, with that being said, is it good? Is it bad? Obviously, in my case, I was out of a job, so it was completely bad. But if you're getting absorbed into one of these larger corporations or practices, now your benefits package might change. Obviously, the schedule might change. There's just so many different things that can happen once the sale of the practice takes place. So this is, you'll see someone post in a group, hey, I think there's some chatter. My doctor's going to sell. What should I do? You'll see run, 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 run. And then every once in a while, you'll see, hey, I was nervous at first, but I love it. I love it because there were so many changes that benefited me. But for each person that the change benefits, unfortunately, there's a person that the change does not benefit at all. So you really have to look at it from take a step back and look at it from a personal point of view, and what works best for you, not to immediately, jump the gun. I remember when mine happened, I could have just walked out that day, but I had a 2-year-old at the time, and I remember thinking like, okay, breathe. You're going to file for unemployment. You're going to be able to spend time with your child at home. And I, even though it was one of the worst times in my life, from a professional standpoint, it was also one of the best because I got approximately, 6 months of being home with my toddler that I would have never gotten had it not been for that. He's 18 now, and I tell him all the time how blessed I was to be able to spend that time with him. So everybody's situation is different. Luckily, I didn't make a rash decision and just walk out and go and get another job. I filed for unemployment. I temped, once a week typically. I went and temped, and then the other 4 days I spent with him during the week. And like I said, now had I went and got another job, like would I really remember that period, that 5 or 6 months time period of what I did every day versus being able to, spend that time with him?
Yeah, and that makes sense. And we're all creatures of habit in the sense of when we're giving that bad news that we just respond with our emotion.
You want to react,
We want to react. We want to react. I remember years ago when my kids were much younger, my 3-year-old phase with my kids was definitely the hardest, and not losing my mind in the sense of I had another mom colleague friend. There was a message that came across, maybe a book or our conversation, that talked about practicing the pause. And that has stuck with me for years. I have definitely fallen off of that wagon of, that immediate response, which is typically not good. And one of those responses that you think back and, a couple days later and you're like, uh, I
Yeah.
maybe could have been a little bit
I might have
nice.
overreacted.
I might have overreacted, and we've all been there. We've all been there. Guilty is charged, whether it's with the husband about your dishes, or it's about the staff member that's showing up late, or the scenario that we're talking about the business to being sold. And on that end, it's still a business. That is one thing that John and I are always talking about as instructors to our dental assistant students, that regardless of a paycheck and the environment, about what is offered to you, that someone still owns that practice. Whether it is a single owner individual, it's a group ownership, or you're getting into now this overhead corporate world of ownership, there's still a business decision that typically has to be made. And as we've said before, that recent graduate dental students are graduating with so much overhead debt that, it has to be hard to withstand and buy a practice that sometimes these doctors don't have any choice but to sell to an overhead person, due to the financial end of what an office has to withstand to keep the lights on, keep the doors open, in order to be able to give you as a staff member the paycheck, which is obviously why we're going to work. So, but on the other hand, there could, like you, John said, there could be some great benefits. Sometimes our small hometown practices don't offer medical benefits. Let's be honest, in our line of profession, there's not too many fantastic retirement opportunities. So maybe that corporate company that's coming in is going to offer some sort of retirement package. Uh, I hear commonly that the downfall of a corporate ownership is sometimes we're losing some of that paid time off. That maybe they, go for, you had 3 or 4 weeks paid vacation and they're taking you down to two. So, who's paying you those 2 weeks of time that you had accumulated that now just poof disappears because Monday morning that the company is now purchased, by that outside person. So it's definitely hard to swallow, but in the sense, practice the pause and kind of let that dust settle.
Yeah, that's sound advice. And honestly, why don't we pick this up on the other side of the break, talk more about all the different things that we've heard as far as benefits change, pros and cons. This way, maybe somebody who's going through this or listening to this at that time, maybe they can adjust and make some decisions while their cooler heads have prevailed. So we'll be right back with the Dental Assistant Nerds podcast. All right, and welcome back for this episode of the Dental Assistant Nerds podcast. We are currently talking about when your practice gets purchased, mostly by a corporation, and what are some of the changes that you can expect. On the other side, we were just getting into some of the benefits, pros and cons. So Amanda was kind of going over that with us.
Yeah, so if we, we're all going to this place of business or our career and our job, but obviously a retirement package is something that could be hugely beneficial to our long term, in the sense that I'm sure the majority of us don't want to work forever. That retirement plan is important. It's hard to incorporate that in a small business and a one person ownership, that they can offer you a percentage that you can put into your retirement. So I would say that's one of the biggest benefits when it comes to that corporate maybe organization buying your practice, and the medical benefits as well. That medical benefits are expensive. That if we do a little bit of our own research, that if you have to buy medical benefits on your own outside of your job, even currently, that it's a lot of money. So that means that obviously, if you're paying your out of pocket, that from a business standpoint, that the owner of your practice also has a high out of pocket that they have to endure as well. So if you have a staff of 15, 20, that, that percentage of that medical benefit is even higher as well. So if a corporate company comes in and they're making an account with an organization for some medical benefits, and there's an even bigger amount of money that they're going to be able to afford those things. So we all have different phases of life. That's what John and I are always saying to our students as well. Different phases, different seasons of what is needed, what is necessary, what is important. So even though, your BFF Karen might be loving the change and you're not, we have to be mindful that Karen's situation is, it's in the season of what she may need or he may need. So that's important to respect that as well. Just because one person is happy and one person is disgruntled, that there is a reason. And a lot of times it usually kind of balances out to be okay, in the midst of the tornado, that letting that dust settle and just giving it time to settle out, it usually comes out on a fairly decent positive on the other end.
Yeah, I know, when you talk about, your coworker, what's right, what's wrong. I know an office that during COVID, they, larger practice, they had probably 7 or 8 staff members. And the doctor kind of come in, hey, I sold to a corporation, and they all quit on the spot except for one. Well, that one, for a while, she was essentially shunned. It was, I can't
Mhm.
believe you're staying there. You know, um, eventually I've noticed that she's been kind of welcomed back. I see some of her posts that she's, going out for lunches and dinners with all of her former coworkers. But, you know, for whatever reason, everybody's hurt.
Right.
We get it. It's not an ideal situation for anyone, you know. Um, but the decision has been made, and you do need a clear head to make that decision. Now, Amanda and I were talking offline, and one thing Amanda brought up, which was a great point, is imagine how that doctor's feeling. Do you think that at the end of the day, the doctor, like, his dream was to go to school, be a dentist, open his own practice? Like, do you think that he or she really wanted to do this? Amanda, why don't you go over some of the points you were talking about?
Yeah, it has to be an emotional standpoint, especially in your case where, you sometimes you really do create that great relationship outside of work with that staff member, even if that staff member's the doctor that you're working for, is John's situation. That guy came to your wedding, that there's a different relationship that is built. And then in this sort of like this background secret has to be kept for a business decision to happen. So, sometimes just reminding ourselves that this isn't anything that happens overnight either. To sell a dental practice is months in the making. Like you said, all these numbers that have to be brought to sell that practice and has to be incorporated into that negotiation. That keeping that kind of under par from our staff has to be difficult. Maybe this office that's in the ownership is not in the great financial state. So, in order to keep the practice open, that this sort of sale has to happen. I do see some doctors that are taking this stance because I know a few personally that are in their late 60s, early 70s, and, they still want to practice dentistry, but they're tired of, in the sense of running the practice,
Right.
that they want
Fighting
to
with
give it,
insurance and
yes, fighting with insurance
dealing with
and
staff.
yeah, dealing with staff. So they said, you know what, I want to keep my hands in the pot and I want to work and I love what I do, but I'm sort of tired of the business side of things. So I have, an orthodontics here in PA, you have my orthos. So, I know an orthodontic practice that they sold to that company. So the doctor's still on staff, but they're not having to worry about, whose PTO is getting increased or decreased and how are the wages being handled, that it's all being handled by this outside HR company. So it is a great way for a doctor to be able to stay on staff and to be able to still continue their career and also be able to keep giving you also your paycheck, which is why you're going. So just yet again, letting that dust settle, but thinking both sides of the perspective, which is sometimes very hard to do, of course.
Yeah. So, if you are thinking, hey, maybe I'm hearing some whispers, maybe some things are happening out of the ordinary, maybe this is kind of coming down the pike, for me, when it happened, it was obviously shock, but it was one of those moments like where you watch a movie and they have a plot twist, and then at the end of the movie the main character starts having all these flashbacks go through their head. And to me, that's exactly what happened. It was like flashback after flashback, and it was like, how could I not have seen this coming?
Yes.
I remember randomly a patient asking the doctor, how many patients do you have? And the doctor rattled off a very specific number. I have 1,847. And I remember thinking at the time, how does he know that? you know,
Yeah.
but obviously I would have never thought, okay. Like obviously it made a lot of sense at the time, once it all came to fruition. But at the time it was just kind of like, oh, well, that's weird, but then you just kind of go about your day. But then there's all these other little things that you're like, oh, hey, remember that time that the doctor asked me, how much of this equipment do we have, or how much of this do we have? All these little things start adding up. So, if you're starting to get, basically they're doing an assessment of the practice to figure out an evaluation of what it's worth. So, you know, obviously if I went through it again, I would be more, hey, like what's going on here? For me, practice was 3 miles from my house. I thought, oh, I'll work here, forever. And it was a big culture shock, obviously, because now instead of, I was going home at lunch, and it was definitely very convenient. I will say that. So, you know, but I think as Amanda and I have hopefully hit home, it's it's not the end of the world. It's something that you have to process. It is change, but you have to look at the situation for, is it better for you or is it worse for you? Are you gaining certain things that maybe you always wanted, now you're getting, or are you losing things that you're like, I just can't see myself losing these things? A lot of times when it does happen, it's essentially another interview process. They don't want to lose all the staff because obviously it's a culture shock to the patients, but it is essentially an evaluation and assessment interview of you sitting down, talking to them explaining, hey, this is how we do things. This is the new benefits package. Do you want to be a part of this culture or not? And, just don't make any rash decisions, when it comes to this.
Yeah, and picking out in the sense of, if are the changes something you can negotiate or that you can handle, and you're like, okay, I have to can I reevaluate my schedule personally outside of work? Or is it you don't have the leeway? Typically in the situation comes to mind is, obviously you have kids that are in elementary age, there's a bus schedule. Someone has to be home to put them on the bus. Somebody has to be available to get them off of the bus. Let's be honest. Daycare schedule. You have to get them there, but daycares have a strict pickup. I have to be there at 5:15. I can't be a minute late. Daycares are now charging for every 5 minutes you're late is another $35 for a pickup fee. So, in regard that the new company that's coming in, you know, give your time yet again to let that dust settle in your mind to diminish what is happening, or start to consider what is happening. I mean, but also respectfully keep that communication open with the new owner, that maybe 2 weeks in or 3 weeks in, that, hey, these are the changes that I understand are happening, and this is something, can I negotiate? Can you figure out a schedule that can work? Do you want to stay, and is there some leeway that they can help you with that schedule? Or if I don't need medical benefits and you're offering it, but they want to give you a pay cut, that I don't need the medical benefits. So naturally, none of us want to endure naturally a pay cut. So keeping in that sense, that professional communication calmly and rationally, and helping out that situation of what you need. And sometimes it's just our sign that it's time to move on.
Yep, yep. So hopefully you take all this into consideration. I think we tried to put together a very informative podcast for you today, full of information, pros and cons. So if it is something that you're going through, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. You can always email us at cornerstonedainstructors@gmail.com. Just let us know if you want to talk about this topic in particular, or maybe another topic for a podcast you'd like to go over.
Yeah, thank you for all your input. We love to hear from you, but continue to stand tall, stand out, and be confident in your knowledge. Keep your mind open to new things and all the changes that we see in dentistry. So thank you for listening, and get ready for that next podcast as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And make sure that you're keeping track of us. You can find us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and make sure that you like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. We really appreciate it. So until the next podcast, we'll catch you next time.